Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. This is Addie D. Hilster, and today I am delighted to bring you a conversation with my friend and colleague, Jill Ippolito. Jill is a true force of nature, and I think it's likely she will leave you feeling inspired and empowered to look for ways you can make a difference in your community. Jill is the founder of UpRising Yoga, a nonprofit known for its trauma-informed work with incarcerated youth. And they've expanded beyond this, but that's really their roots. And we talk about the beginnings and recent evolutions of Jill's work through UpRising Yoga and how she sees their programs as more than just yoga classes, but as part of a systemic social change effort. As Jill says, why be a volunteer when you can be a pioneer? Don't you love that? She also shares a little bit about her own firsthand experience of being in juvenile hall as a teenager and how that informs her work and the way that she's able to communicate with the young people in her classes. Nowadays, in addition to teacher trainings and the services that the organization directly provides, Jill also offers coaching for individuals. So I took the opportunity in this interview to ask her for some practical tips for starting service-oriented projects. And we really covered a lot in this conversation. If you enjoy this episode or you've learned something from other conversations here, may I ask you to take a moment and rate and review the podcast? The process seems to be a little bit different on every single player, of course. But if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, the way you do it is you go to our show's page on the app and scroll down to the ratings and review section, and you click the See All button to find the Write a Review button, where then you can actually share a little something. Not only is that feedback super helpful, but it makes a huge difference in new people finding the show. Here's a review we got recently, written by Chris from NC. They say, I am so happy I found this podcast. I've been binge listening because each episode is jam-packed with helpful information about these practices. Addie is so knowledgeable and has amazing guests who have so much to offer. Thanks for this fantastic podcast. And thank you, Chris from NC, for that comment. It means a lot. Okay, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you very much for listening today, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jill Ippolito. Okay, hello everyone. I am happy to be here today with my friend Jill Weiss Ippolito, and we struggled getting our internet to behave to start this recording, so I feel pretty accomplished already that we're beginning. And Jill is someone who I really admire because she's done a lot of really beautiful service work over the years through the nonprofit that she founded, UpRising Yoga. And they have worked for over a decade with incarcerated people and in gang prevention and aftercare programs with homeless youth at mental health clinics and in all kinds of different venues. Currently, she's teaching meditation, mindfulness, and mindset coaching to young adults incarcerated in federal prison and to federal judges. And we're going to talk a bit about that and how her work has evolved and developed. But I met Jill, I think it was 2017 when I met you, something like that. She's making a face. This was back when I had my yoga studio and we held the accessible yoga training there with Jill. And Jill came, and I think you might have been one of the guest speakers as well as taking the training. and we got partnered up on some of the exercises and kind of got to know each other. And then we brought you, Jill, and your team to the studio to come back and teach the UpRising Yoga training a couple of times. So we've had this connection for a while, and I'm just excited to hear more about the directions that things are going for you and to share your work with our listeners today. So that's kind of a long intro, Jill. Do you want to start by telling us a little more about who you are and what you do and your background?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Addie. What I can add to the intro is then I had you come and share at our training online in the pandemic, and I took your mindfulness training and I studied yin yoga with you. So
That's
you are
right.
my teacher that I admire, that I'm honored to call you my teacher.
Oh, it's mutual. Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.
And I remember our partnering bed yoga.
That's right.
And it's funny, before, while we were troubleshooting the tech and you were talking about the work you're going to be doing in the community, I know, I don't know about you, but I know that bed yoga helped me in so many settings with, especially people wondering like how they can breathe deeper. They think they need to be in these elaborate positions or heart open, or when we stress, we freeze and
Hmm.
don't have as much access for the space that breathing allows us. But going back to you and I partnering to bed yoga, if all you can blink your eyes, you can still benefit from somebody sitting by your side guiding you. This actually happened. My mom is a caretaker to a woman who I think is 104 now, and
Wow.
she was holding her hand in the hospital, and my mom was so nervous that I was texting her to breathe in and take longer exhales. And she wrote back, "Oh, honey, that helps so much." Like, it's
Aw.
amazing what techniques that might be brief can just make such a difference in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, that was in the accessible yoga training that we were doing, the bed yoga practice.
Yes.
And it was interesting, just, your organization, the accessible yoga organization, and the different sort of ways that these trainings and these teams are trying to bring the skills and benefits of these yoga and mindfulness practices to different groups and different audiences outside of the kind of mainstream studio environment. You have a lot of experience with that. So can you tell us a little bit about the work you've done with UpRising and how that all got started?
Oh, sure. We started volunteering in juvenile hall, and this was in 2011. And at the time, I was teaching the hot yoga, and wondering, oh, I don't think we can put mirrors and heat in here. I mean, I'm laughing now. Like, that
Probably
wasn't
not.
really my plan. But, people that were, really wanting to support that found that possible. Like, oh, let's build a studio here. No, let's adapt to where we're at.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that was never my goal. It was always to make sure that yoga is an education with many different styles, so I can bring in many different teachers. And
Hmm.
we did something called, in the very beginning, we were just figuring it out. It was uh, my now husband, Nick, who also speaks at a lot of our trainings. He and I
Yeah.
would go into the boys' unit. My colleague Mary would go into the girls' unit, mostly because I ended up going to the girls later. But it was, whoa, what do we do? How do we? And from there, we got a lot of volunteers. We wrote a manual and we started the trainings. And our first training was in 2012. Yeah, 2012, I think.
Mm.
And we did 3 a year or more, and we built upon them. Each time we brought in professional speakers. From the very beginning, our experience working with the foster youth, 82% were sexually trafficked. So we had the CSEC minors, we had foster youth, we
Hmm.
had general population as well, but we spread like wildfire across the camps, juvenile halls, all across Los Angeles. And that started training probation staff. I was asked to build a curriculum and train probation staff. Then that also attracted larger nonprofits that said, can we write you into these grants? Then with SBCC, which I know you're familiar with, we got a 5-year grant to teach, I believe, like 12 classes a week in schools, parks. We've taught in hospitals. I mean, anywhere. I can't think of a place we haven't taught. So we started to get contracts with other nonprofits, the gang prevention and aftercare program in parks. We were invited to a lot of different nonprofits teaching on Skid Row, the unhoused education. So little kids going to school, school on wheels through USC. We went to UCLA, Cal State LA. Like, again, I couldn't list all the places we went. And then the trainings also went to other countries and other states that people invited me to studios. And it was a certified program, 16 hours. We did them online. The last one I did was hybrid in the Panhandle in Florida. And that one just kind of let me put it on pause for a little bit.
It's so amazing, as you're describing the many ways that this organization has kind of moved into different areas and different types of expressions of the mission. And I'm sure you could not have envisioned all of that when you started way back. And you started out really in the juvenile justice system. And I'm really curious just to hear a little bit about why did you start there? What was it that drew you to working with incarcerated youth and system involved youth?
My husband, Nick, was my boyfriend at the time, and he toured Camp Challenger, that's named after the astronaut crash in the sky, Camp Challenger. And he came home and just shuddered. He looked like he saw a ghost. He was very pale. And I said, what happened? And he said, he started describing what it was like in there. And it breaks his heart that those kids are in those conditions. And my first question was, can I teach yoga in there? And he said, I don't know. And he said, if you need any help, let me know. And I didn't know his job or his role really well enough to even say, great, line me up with people. So months went by. We didn't really get, we got tours. We didn't really get a red carpet. I mean, if anybody that wants to set out and do this work, I mean, some places take a year to 5 years to 3 years. Like, I've been in conversation and invited to places, even after having an established program, where we might be talking for 3 years before a contract comes in. And, then there's funding. Like, there's such a long, laborious process.
You really need persistence and to really be clear that you want to do this. And
you do. And I wasn't that clear, except for I kept saying, let's do this. And, we were at a party and he introduced me to probably the people that can say yes. And he introduced me that that's what I wanted to do. And then all these business cards started coming out.
Wow.
One of them I called and they said, when do you want to start?
Was Nick working was he working in some capacity for LA County at that time? And that's why he had some of these connections?
Yes. He still works for LA County.
Got it.
And at the time, he was a policy advisor. And worked for the Board of Supervisors.
What a fortuitous connection.
Yes. Supervisor Don Kanabi is a real hero of ours. So what happened is I basically would go home because I started probation, invited me to the table to sit down with the social workers, with the kids' cases, their lawyers, and we would have a meeting about what's going on in these units. And so I could talk about the stories that the pregnant girls or, one boy that really wants to get out. And, I could hear things that other people couldn't hear. And the fact that I was included and was invited was amazing. That was groundbreaking. And so I would go home and tell Nick, from these meetings that I would have, I said, did you know that child sex trafficking, and he's like, what? And so the next morning he literally woke up and said, what did you just say? And he said, I've been working for the county for over 25 years and I've never heard anything like this. So he went to Supervisor Don Kanabe, who brought in the probation staff that had all this data, that was already working on a federal grant to bring wellness to the CSEC minors. And it collided and blew up, and it became Supervisor Don Kanabe's really big topic to help
Wow.
get the laws changed, to get, so Nick at the time would go back to DC. I got scooped up with the CSEC trainings. And so they would invite me, I'd bring my table with the UpRising Yoga, little, what's it called? Those fabrics you put over tablecloth.
Yeah.
I would stand there with my little pamphlets and, so then that's where activism and social, work starts to collide. Like there's clearly traumatized survivors that
Oh, yeah.
are leading this work and standing on stages, re-traumatizing with their story, but getting this information out to people that can start to make laws. So that's what Uprising's nugget became. Wait a minute. I'm not just there to bring a class with movement. I'm there for policy change. And so
Amazing.
I kept saying, why be a pioneer? I mean, why be a volunteer when you can be a pioneer?
I
That was
love
one of
that.
my sayings, because I really wanted, to be at this, because I was invited to work with the supervisors and to start to train probation staff so
It
that
kind of
it's,
sounds like the fact that you were teaching yoga sort of was this interesting like backdoor in to things where people opened up to you differently. Maybe the kids you saw a different side, or maybe you had just like a different point of view that was useful to different people in on the policy side, but also to the kids that you were serving. Do you think
well,
that's
to
the case?
staff really, because I learned very early on that so many organizations focus on the kids, let's get all the services to the kids and the funding, and staff is burnt out, tired, they need healing too. So I
Mm-hmm.
partnered with the local yoga studio that I worked at, and they gave me free classes that I could pass out to staff, and they would come to the class. So I wanted to
Hmm.
make sure staff and social workers had, so this is really the definition of trauma informed community building.
Yeah.
And I was also working with, uh, certain people that could make really great changes. We worked on something called the LA model, where they tore down one of the juvenile halls and they were making this, you know, trauma informed community where the everybody from the chef to the guard, everybody was trained in trauma informed. And that's when the buzzword really started to kick off.
Hmm.
And, when I say buzzword, that usually equates funding, you know, which is then programs. And, we were positioned with, people now have asked me, like, how do you get these contracts? And I'm like, well, it's not like, yes, I happen to excel and I like meeting with people and talking and building and creating the vision of what can we do with these funds in this space. But it, I've had such a long duration
Hmm.
of successful delivery with
Hmm.
services that just by reputation were invited, so we just completed an online trauma informed partnering with Heck Trauma Institute in Orange County. And that went really well. That was exciting because now that I've trained so many uprising yoga teachers from all over, I can say, hey, are you able at this time to do this? And we can then, create career pathways and hire
Hmm.
people. But
That's amazing.
yeah,
And I'm curious because I know that you all spent a lot of years like going into these environments and teaching these classes. How did the pandemic change the programs? Because you weren't able to go in for a long time, right? What
right,
happened?
right. it put me on pause. I was also talking about when you were trying to get my name. I started doing stand-up comedy after, which I did 20 years ago. And it just during the pandemic, it was a coping mechanism for me. And I developed a character named Jill So Chill, which was combating how angst I was, had no chill at all. I was scrubbing my groceries in the garage like the rest of us, and it's, I just, it broke my heart that, I can't really speak about the probation department in Los Angeles, but there's so much need that wouldn't make it safe for me to go in. I
Mhm.
did meet with them. They asked me to come back. I created a curriculum with the expressive arts. So after doing comedy and doing this mindfulness and meditation and really exploring my own healing modalities from trauma with EMDR, breath work, and many, just kind of taking a backseat, journaling. That's what we did in this program with the federal court systems. So we spoke for about a year before that program. He couldn't tell which courtroom was going to be open. So a lot of what my work looked like is what's open, are we safe? The one in Florida was very challenging. However, I feel that one of the things that I love to do, it's one of the things that I talk about constantly in the trauma-informed yoga trainings and when people privately coach with me or in groups, I and it is trauma-informed. It's look around in the community and see who you can bring to the table with their wealth of knowledge. And I happen to
Mhm.
find a doctor of juvenile gang prevention in this tiny town in Florida where I grew up visiting my dad in Niceville on the Panhandle. And, the fact that I got this man to speak at our training, it felt like I just got, the Rolling Stones. I was so excited. And he had the heart of what I like to see when I work with people that, you know, especially when you're dealing with incarcerated settings, staff is so overly burdened, and
Mhm.
it's a hostile work environment that causes a lot of trauma. And he just spoke so eloquent and speaks of the future and gave me really promising hope for laws that were being changed. It
Amazing.
wasn't just, oh, your cute little program, you stretch and do something called yoga. What's that? No, we're activism, we're social justice, we're looking at the history. We're talking about different styles of yoga. We're talking about mindfulness and meditation and breathing. And, now if there's music, there's expressive arts and dance and,
Mhm.
journaling. And how do we really take the somatics of breath, body, movement, and feeling? What's cognitive? What's feeling? So that a lot of that branched out for me in the pandemic with mindset
Mhm.
coaching, which I think I might have
Yeah,
touched on that in the
I love
online
that.
training.
I want to
I
come back
started
to that in a
coaching.
moment because I'm just like in awe of how you are such a like master connector and you have this ability to just like see the whole system and to work like on that system level with different, groups of people. And I think you said you're teaching mindfulness to federal judges. Are you teaching judges? Because I want to hear a
Okay.
little bit about that. I think that's
Okay.
awesome.
So I got an email and I spoke to
I mean, I
someone
think
who
judges
said,
probably need some mindfulness, right?
it's
They
the
have so much
entire
power,
courtroom.
so much
Yes, it's a
power.
program. It's called CASA. And it's a program where, young adults that are incarcerated in federal prison come in on this and do this program. And I'm the mindfulness meditation portion that is in 6 different settings. So Riverside, 2 in Los Angeles, and 1 in I think San Bernardino. And so these courtrooms are closed down, and judges are there, um, court reporters. It looks like, a TV show. It's like,
It's like Law
wait
and
a minute,
Order.
it feels like an acting job. And, the person that asked me to be a part of his vision, which was unique to me, it felt like it answered a vision for me where I kept saying more impact, less heavy lifting, more funding. And it checked those boxes. That was one of my goals, like becoming a success goal coach. It was like, okay, can I look at how I can make more impact, without me building everything, all the time or starting from scratch. And so he had a program going. And like I said, I get brought in. He wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me and my PowerPoint, but that we're all practicing it. So, we put on the timer. I talked a little bit about it. I also talked about how, I was formerly incarcerated. And so with the juveniles, I was in juvenile hall, and I would tell the kids, look, I was in juvenile hall when I was your age. And they all looked shocked, like, what did you do? And I said, I didn't run fast enough, and they laughed. And, I was arrested as an adult, and I was on a felony program. And so it really, I think the guy that hired me was surprised when I started to comfortably share in the entire courtroom. And I think that also led to my coping mechanism of these different healing modalities, using the mindset coaching that helped me lift off and see a different vision and return back to a comfort of performance art and comedy. So how do I blend all of these together? That's one, entertaining, two, educational, but most importantly, something that someone can walk away and feel like they want to live and breathe deeper through a stressful, like, it helps to see someone else did that and they came in on the other side, and a lot of people look at me and I don't look like someone who couldn't form sentences, and so it helps to see that, my recovery is giving back.
That's what I was thinking when you were saying that you would share that with the kids in the juvenile justice system and tell them that you had the same experience, and they look shocked, because I think that, when you're that young and you're in such an intense situation like that, it's hard to see a future. It's like, how do you imagine yourself as a like polished adult who's doing okay, So that's just so powerful that you had that and that willingness to share that with them.
What made me so touched was to watch the judge and the court appellate, all join in. And
Wow.
that's my experience of yoga. What we always said is yoga is a gift. No one can take it from you. And you're sharing, whether you're sitting down on the mat and doing nothing at all. Like, I wouldn't have a yoga practice if a teacher didn't say to me, just sit down. Just, you don't have to do anything. And I know the hardest part is getting out the door and getting there. And now with the pandemic and Zoom and meetings, everywhere, people can log on. You don't really have to go anywhere. And I know that I saw you offered so many great classes throughout. And I love about our yoga community and most businesses in general, people just kind of went, all right, let's roll with it. How are we going to do this? We need to get this information out to the people that need it most. And
it's adapting, like you said.
Yep, it's all of us.
All of us adapting. I love it. And, speaking of adaptation, like you have led trauma informed yoga trainings like many, many, many over the years. And so you've been working all these different directions, including training teachers and people who want to be of service. And now more recently, you've added coaching to the mix. And so I'm really curious about, why you decided to add coaching. Is that something that like picks up where training leaves off, or is it a new thing? What do you have to say about that?
Oh, thanks for asking, because that really became my passion. Is I hired a coach and I saw the results of, just making my mission statement. I was pretty good about that. Like, this is my mission statement. I'm going to accomplish it. But I wasn't really sure about the steps on how to get there. And working with this guy on a regular basis with accountability, and I lit up. I ran to those phone calls. I got so much out of it. And I just felt partnered. Like, I was really happy to see uh, just my goals flourish. And so that's when we started Deep Shift coaching. And what I realized, because he basically said to me, well, after people take your training, then what do they do? And I said, well, they usually write me a year later or more asking what to do. And he said, well, what if you made an offering and worked with people to help emulate the programs that you've built in their area? And so when I made that offer, I made these little small groups, people signed up, and I did 8 weeks at first, but then they kept signing up again. So I was like, okay, now I've got 6 months, and I'm really excited. I just announced 15% off for my 6-month program, because I'm going to celebrate that I'm getting certified in a success goal coaching program, because I also did a lot of consultations with, companies or people that want to start companies that are looking at the model that I developed. And I realized, like, well, consulting and coaching are two different things. But
Mm-hmm.
if I can blend the two, someone that signs up with a coaching program with me can literally walk away, with, their vision of how they want to take their business in what direction. And so, and it's I don't know, I think that it got me to see people take the work. And again, it also
Mm-hmm.
helped me reach more people in a broader, like, it just threw the net out there to give more of what I have. I mean, I know on social media, someone said to me, why don't you join TikTok and do your trainings there? And I was like, okay. So at the time, I joined a TikTok, and I put on my little UpRising shirt, and I got my
Sweet.
manual out, and it didn't feel as natural as you're home alone, and you're pressing, how it is. You're pressing
Recording.
record, and then, oh, get up and do a little dance and celebrate something. And I have no idea what I'm doing on there. I'm just trying to have fun and do
Mm-hmm.
silly videos, but I maybe find a way to get the work broadcast so that people have access to it.
I think it's awesome that you're offering this now, because it's one thing to take a training and like learn the skills and get inspired to be of service, but then it's a whole other thing to like concretely make that happen. And especially in training these complex systems, like where you've been so active over the years. So I think that, yeah, people need some guidance, and they need probably someone to coach them on how to like clarify where to start and how to persist and how to keep it going. And you have so much experience to offer there.
Thanks. One thing that we found is somebody might come to me and say, I want to do what you're doing. And then when we get into what we called in the manual, your personal intention, and
Mm-hmm.
start writing and going deep and exploring why, they might go, oh, I actually don't want to work in that area and with those people, because it's really like, where is your heart being called? And like, there's places I went in that I can't go back. It's not, I'm not bringing my best there. I'm bringing an emotional wreckage that,
Mm-hmm.
does not bring empowerment. And that's only happened once. So, but where I'm like, oh, that's not a spot for me. But we've had teachers like that, come in and then find out that's not who they actually want to serve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you could light up and be inspired by, hearing the stories of what you've done or what someone else, has done. But then, you kind of have to find your own way and your own where your gifts are really going to be best used, and where you're not going to be like triggered the whole time that you're trying to work with people. And that could probably be a process, I would imagine, a journey. Have there been times like throughout all this work where you've had to learn from missteps or mistakes along the way of, kind of learning the hard way of how not to go about it or overcoming other obstacles?
Well, I know there's a story I like to tell because I feel so grateful that I could hear the person tell me. I was teaching at a grief camp for 100 kids, two different classes, 50 class each outside. And I said to this little girl on her mat, I said, "Oh, make sure you move your hip, like childbearing hips so that they're open." And she looked at me and said, "What are you going to say to the boys about their hips?" And I went, "Oh, I just said, "I'm so sorry. That was something that was said to me and it just fell out of my mouth." And I said, "Thank you for correcting me. I will never say that again." Like those kind of missteps, I love to be corrected. As far as events, I would say this is one thing. If somebody has not done an event, I would definitely make a sheet where you keep asking questions. Where's the parking? What is the room? I mean, we literally have,
Get
I
those
think
details down.
in our training, we have like,
Hmm.
be cautious of saying yes and overexcited to go deliver something when you step back and have actually, even if you haven't done it before and you're excited to get in because someone said yes, you still want to make sure alignment, safety,
Hmm.
mat placement, where is it stored, who's paying for what,
I
those
feel
kind of.
like you guys talked about this in the training, or maybe Dijon was telling a story about having to haul like armloads of yoga mats super far, or just some stuff that was not really ready for you, and
Oh,
like that it undermines the whole purpose of you being there if you haven't
oh my
completely
gosh.
like worked out all of those logistical details that you might assume would be in place, but these are not environments that are used to having like a yoga class pop up.
There's also, I mean, we had a storage space and we kept mats that yoga studios donated to us. And on the weekends, Nick and I would go with a hose and clean dirty mats to bring
Oh,
in. And people were so generous sending all kinds of things, but we got to say no, only brand new mats. So, I know Lululemon, they sent us, I think Rob Schwar sent us, you can request mats from him. He has
hmm,
a organization, I think it's called the Give Back Yoga Foundation,
hmm.
and they sent 100 mats of new Lululemon mats to the grief camp for the kids, and they got to keep them. And when you think of abundance and tap into resources, then there's less making do,
Hmm.
and it took us years to finally go, oh, and
Yeah.
partnership is something that, I feel very, fortunate and grateful that I've been invited to create that. I think that's a misstep for someone new that wants to build their own thing, start their own thing, get out there fast. I know at Omega Institute and Yoga Service Council, we wrote that book, Best Practices for Yoga in the Criminal Justice System. And
Hmm.
I know that was one of the main chapters was look around, see who's doing, look, find your colleagues, and really try to see if you can enhance their program or can you work together? Is there a way that we can share resources?
Yeah, I love that. Like, don't try to do it alone because it's too
Mm-hmm.
big, and there may be other people already, carving that path that you can just join. That's yeah, that seems
And
like a very
strength in
important.
numbers. I think
Yeah.
I would train teachers and then be in negotiation with a center that could. So that's another thing too, is I had yoga teachers that would take the training and then so excited that, oh, they're going to go get a contract like mine, but they're an individual and I'm a nonprofit,
Hmm.
and there's funding that can go to a nonprofit. So there's also burnout
Yeah.
We had one teacher that I was paying, and yet they were trying to drum up a contract that UpRising Yoga was negotiating with. And I was trying to explain, you can have all those classes at the rate you want. So you're probably not, but she was giving it for free. So they were never going to pay her. And she said, oh, but they're going to pay me. They promise. And I'm like, they can't. They don't have funding. The funding comes from the state to be used in a nonprofit. You know what I mean? Like, so
there's ways to do it that
yeah, because everyone
yeah.
will tell you we don't have the funds, so you can do it for free. And then probation would turn around and say to me, we would love to hire you and have you integrated as a resourceful program for the probation department, but we can't because Sally's teaching, dance yoga moves on Saturdays for free. And so they can't justify why pay. And for me, yoga was never just a volunteer thing. It was always a healing modality, an effective tool for those incarcerated. Like there's so much, and so many teachers go through so much training to just be able to
go volunteer.
Then that becomes this whole other privilege thing of, oh, it's okay. I just spent all this money on training and I want to give back. And, nothing wrong with that.
But it limits like who has the time and the ability to teach for free, and that's a narrow slice of people. And I think when you're trying to do this systemic change work that you're doing, it's much stronger in an organization. A nonprofit has to go through a whole process to get established, and that has a lot more credibility to entities like counties and states and these kinds of institutions that you want to work with. So I think that it makes sense to not just try to go off and teach something as your own little lovely individual class, but to join in that strength in numbers, like you said.
I'm glad you said that, because that was a big hurdle to, even though we say that throughout the trauma-informed yoga training, people that graduate are excited. Well, great. I got all that information. I've had people come up and say, I'm going to emulate your program. I'm like, great. Stay in touch. We're not competitors, and I have one student that I've now gone back to her and said, hey, how can we partner? Do you want to connect? Like, because her program's so beautiful. I mean, and I love her very clear path. Like, what you're doing, I'm going to do it. And she did. And there's a lot of people like that I hope they stay in touch, and she and I met a couple months ago in San Diego. And I mean, just Joanne Jaffe. I don't know if you met her, but she has a really beautiful program that maybe we'll partner, maybe not, but we're sharing resources.
I love it. Let's imagine that someone is listening and they're thinking about, they would love to use their talents, their resources, their trainings in some way to make the world a better place. Maybe it's with the sorts of, the populations that you teach, the sorts of classes you do. Maybe it's something different. And they're not sure where to start. They're not sure how to do it. If you could give that person like one piece of advice, put on your coaching hat, what would you say to that person who's just kind of in that place of like, I want to do something, but I don't know how?
I think the first thing I would say is to listen to your heart. Surrender, ask where the need is calling you instead of you going to fill a need. When you, and that goes back to mindful meditation. For me, I like to look at my hands down, my palms up in that surrender, and really just as a prayer, where am I needed? What's calling me? What is something that you you know you belong, and you're not there to fix anything. You're not there to tell them they need you. It's I believe when you're quiet, when you're in nature, when you hear your heart, maybe you're writing, you're connecting, you're breathing. I believe that's when that innate little silent voice that says, I'm not sure, but it's intuition, and it's a calling, it's a passion. And then that helps you avoid burnout, because
Mm-hmm.
you're just supposed to be there. It's an invitation. It's not a marching to go make something happen. And to me, that's how Uprising Yoga just flourished. It wasn't me making this happen. It was me saying, hey, can I teach in there? I think we can do a good job. And then I forgot I was in that juvenile hall. And my mom said, I picked you up from there when you were a kid. And it turns out I was in that juvenile hall as a kid. So my natural healing, my own trauma journey begins, and it didn't dawn on me till later, like, how there is a need. What do I have that can ease suffering?
That's a beautiful way to, I think, invite that reflection and that mindful receptivity. I love the answer you just gave to that question. So, Jill, how can people connect with you further and learn more about the work you're doing these days and follow up and ask questions and connect with you?
So I'm everywhere. I'm on yogaforhealingtrauma.com, uprisingyoga.org, and both of those are Instagram. And both of those, I believe, Uprising Yoga has the TikTok. I did start Jill So Chill is a website, which is writing a performance piece that I'll do this year,
I love it.
and combining all this work with humor, some fun stories.
It all
So
weaves
Jill So Chill,
together. I love it.
yeah, Uprising Yoga and Deep Shift Coaching is umbrellaed under the yogaforhealingtrauma.com website.
Okay, I will post in the show notes all the links to your socials and your website so people can find you. Thanks so much for taking the time today and braving the internet challenges. I think it worked out. But it's been really great to have you share your story with everybody here.
Oh, thank you, Addie. Where'd you go? There you are. It just, the screen came up. This worked. I'm so happy. Thank you
Thank
so much for
goodness.
having me. And I've just really enjoyed your podcast and your teachings, and watching you grow
Oh, thank
in
you,
so many
Jill.
ways as well.
Awesome. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and/or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.